The celestial venture drifted silently through the nebula Yaros, its hull glinting under the kaleidoscope of lights that danced across the cosmic expanse. The nebulous clouds shifted like waves in a slow, deliberate tide, their hues ranging from deep indigo to shimmering gold. Captain Lila Voss stood on the bridge, her sharp, calculating gaze fixed on the holographic navigation map. The crew, a mix of seasoned miners and restless explorers, moved about with the ease of routine, their banter punctuating the steady hum of the ship's engines. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Eric, the ship's sensor operator. He adjusted the controls, his eyes narrowing as faint readings flickered on the screen. "I'm picking up something. Weak signal. Could be nothing, but it's odd." "Define odd," Lila said, her tone clipped. She crossed the bridge with the authority of someone who had seen too many odd things turn deadly. "It's coming from that asteroid field," Eric replied, gesturing toward the viewport. Beyond the swirling mists of the nebula lay a cluster of jagged rocks, their surfaces glinting faintly under the nebulous glow. The asteroid spun slowly, their paths intersecting in a chaotic ballet that made approach dangerous. "Marcus," Lila called over her shoulder to the chief engineer, who was busy adjusting a control panel. "We're not here to play rescue. What do you think?" Marcus, a rugged man with grease-streaked hands and a permanent scowl, looked up from his work. "Depends. Is it worth the risk of bringing some alien plague back on board? Or worse, wasting my time?" He grinned, but his voice held an undercurrent of curiosity. "If it's tech, though, might be worth a look." Lila sighed. "Eric, plot a safe course. Let's see what's out there." The ship maneuvered carefully into the asteroid field, the proximity alarms beeping faintly as chunks of rock floated perilously close. Outside, the view grew darker, the nebulous glow dimming under the shadows of the asteroids. When the celestial venture reached the source of the signal, they found it, a metallic object lodged in the surface of a large asteroid. It was a capsule, sleek and alien in design, its surface marked by burns and scratches that told a story of violent ejection. The crew donned their suits and descended, their boots crunching against the dusty, uneven surface of the asteroid. The wind, if it could be called that, whipped around them, carrying fine, sharp particles that shimmered in the dim light. "Looks like it's been here a while," Marcus said, running his hand along the capsule's exterior. His fingers brushed against an engraved symbol, faint but intricate, its meaning lost on them. "Not human tech, that's for sure." "Can you get it open?" Lila asked. "Give me a minute," Marcus replied, already pulling tools from his belt. With practiced efficiency, he pried the hatch open, a faint hiss escaping as the capsule depressurized. Inside, nestled among remnants of a shattered harness, was a figure. The alien child was small, its body frail and curled into a defensive position. Its translucent skin shimmered faintly, reflecting the nebula's light in shades of blue and violet. Its large glass-like eyes blinked sluggishly as it took in its surroundings, and two small coiled tentacles on its torso trembled faintly. The creature emitted a soft melodic sound, almost like a question. "Is it alive?" Amara, the ship's medic, asked, stepping forward with her scanner. "Barely," Marcus said, his voice unusually soft. "It's weak, malnourished, might not have much time." "We don't even know what it is," Lila said, her voice hard but uncertain. "Or if it's dangerous." "It's a child," Marcus shot back, his tone firm. "And it's alone. We can't just leave it here." The alien flinched at the raised voices, its tentacles pulling closer to its body. Amara crouched beside it, her movements slow and deliberate. "Shh," she whispered. "It's okay. We won't hurt you." Lila hesitated, the weight of the decision clear in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Bring it on board. But if this thing jeopardizes the crew, it's out." As they carefully lifted the alien from the capsule, its wide, luminous eyes fixed on Marcus, a faint glow reflecting in its gaze. Whatever this creature had endured, it was clear. It had no one else. And whatever secrets it carried, they were now the crew's to uncover. Aboard the celestial venture, The alien child remained curled on the medbay's examination table, its wide, crystalline eyes flicking between the humans that surrounded it. The room was bathed in a sterile white glow, but the soft hum of the ship's engines seemed to calm the creature. It clutched at the edge of the table with its small, translucent fingers, its tentacles coiling and uncoiling in a rhythm that Amara, the ship's medic, recognized as nervousness. "Vitals are faint but stable," Amara said, her scanner emitting a low beep as she passed it over the child's fragile frame. "This isn't like anything I've seen before. Its physiology is delicate, almost like glass, but there's a resilience there, like it's designed to endure just enough to survive." Marcus stood by the doorway, arms crossed. His usual gruff demeanor softened as he watched the alien. "It's tougher than it looks. Surviving in a busted capsule like that? Alone? That's no small feat." The alien tilted its head toward him, its luminous eyes catching the light like prisms. It let out a soft, melodic sound, a series of notes that rose and fell like a question. Marcus took a step closer, crouching slightly to meet its gaze. "Yeah, kid, I'm talking about you," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "Does it understand?" Lila asked, her arms folded tightly across her chest as she observed from the corner of the room. Her posture was stiff, her expression guarded. "We don't even know if it's intelligent." "It's watching us, isn't it?" Marcus replied without looking back. "That's intelligence enough." Amara nodded, tapping at her datapad. "It's trying to communicate. Those sounds, they're deliberate. It's scared, but it's reaching out." "Scared or not, we need answers," Lila said, stepping closer. "Eric's running scans on the capsule's systems. If there's data in there, I want it decrypted. Yesterday. We need to know where it came from and why it was out there alone." The alien flinched slightly at her sharp tone, its tentacles pulling tighter against its body. Marcus raised a hand, motioning for Lila to ease off. "You're scaring it," he said bluntly. Lila exhaled, her gaze softening just a fraction. "This isn't a charity mission, Marcus. If this thing brings trouble to my crew, I'll handle it," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm. He glanced back at the alien, who had begun to relax again, its tentacles slowly unfurling. "It's just a kid. Let's give it a chance." Minutes later, Eric's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, I've got something. The capsule's data core had partial recordings. You're going to want to see this." In the medbay, the crew gathered around a small holographic projector that Eric had wheeled in. He tapped a few buttons, and the device hummed to life, projecting fragmented images into the air. The recordings were disjointed but vivid, scenes of a lush alien world covered in crystalline structures that shimmered under twin suns. The creatures inhabiting it were similar to the child, elegant, translucent beings with flowing movements and melodic voices. The beauty of the scene was shattered as massive shadows swept across the sky. Gigantic ships, angular and menacing, descended like harbingers of doom. Explosions erupted, the ground splitting open as fire and debris rained down. The recordings cut to chaos, shrieks, collapsing structures, and frantic movements. Then silence. The final image froze on the hologram, the face of an adult alien, its expression desperate as it activated the child's capsule. Its voice trembled in a melodic language as it placed the child inside, sealing the hatch just as the hologram flickered and died. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the scene settling over the crew. Marcus broke the silence first. "That's no coincidence. Someone wanted this kid to survive, and someone else wanted them." "All dead," Lila said, her voice low. She turned to Eric. "Anything on who attacked them?" Eric shook his head. "Nothing solid. The systems were badly damaged, but whoever they were, they didn't leave survivors." The alien child emitted a soft, mournful sound, its gaze fixed on the now dark hologram. Marcus placed a hand gently on the table beside it, his voice steady. "You're safe now, kid. We've got you." The words felt like a promise, but even as he spoke them, Lila's expression remained tense. The crew had taken the child in, but the question hung unspoken between them. How long before the danger it fled found them too? The alien child, whom the crew had tentatively named Karin, after deciphering fragments of data from the capsule, began to adapt to life aboard the celestial venture. Its movements were cautious but curious, and it watched the humans, with an intensity that suggested it was learning. Marcus, in particular, had taken it under his wing, his gruff exterior softening as Karen followed him around the ship, mimicking his actions with a quiet determination. In the engineering bay, Karen stood near Marcus, its large crystalline eyes reflecting the warm glow of the reactor core. It observed intently as Marcus adjusted a piece of machinery, its small tentacles curling and uncurling in rhythm with his movements. "You watching, kid?" Marcus said, glancing over his shoulder. "You'll be fixing this rust bucket before long." Karen responded with a series of soft, melodic tones, its tentacles reaching toward a loose bolt. With a cautious twist, it began to mimic Marcus's actions, tightening the bolt with surprising precision. Marcus chuckled. "Well, look at that. Got yourself a knack for machines, huh?" In the med bay, Amara monitored Karin's health closely. The creature's translucent skin pulsed faintly with a rhythm she believed was linked to its emotional state. "It's fascinating," she told Lila during a routine briefing. "Karin's physiology is unlike anything I've seen. It's fragile but adaptable, almost like it was designed to endure, just enough." Lila, her arms folded tightly, nodded, but said nothing. Her unease hadn't faded and she kept a watchful eye on the situation. "And the device? Have we learned anything new?" she asked. Amara gestured to Eric, who had been working tirelessly to decrypt more of the capsule's data. Eric, bleary-eyed but determined, activated the holographic projector again. This time the projection displayed symbols and patterns alongside fragmented audio. "I managed to extract more context," he said. "The child species, the Meliari, weren't just peaceful, they were unique. Their biology allowed them to manipulate energy fields on a level we can barely comprehend." The hologram shifted, showing what appeared to be a Meliari adult standing before a crystalline structure. The structure pulsed as the Meliari extended their tentacles, channeling energy into the crystal, which then emitted a brilliant, cascading light. "They didn't just live in harmony with their environment," Eric continued. "They were a part of it. Their ability to control energy fields wasn't just a gift, it was their way of life." Marcus frowned, leaning forward. "If they're so harmless, why would anyone attack them?" "That's where it gets worse," Eric replied, his tone darkening. The projection changed again, this time showing a fleet of angular metallic ships descending on the Meliari world. The ships unleashed beams of light that shattered the crystalline structures, leaving the landscape scorched and lifeless. The attackers, whoever they were, weren't just destroying, they were harvesting. The energy fields the Meliari controlled, it's like they were extracting it, weaponizing it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Amara was the first to speak. "And Karin," Eric said, his voice quiet, "is the last of them, the last Meliari." Karin, who had been sitting quietly near Marcus, emitted a low, mournful tone as though it understood. Its luminous eyes turned to the projection, reflecting the devastation of its homeworld. Marcus placed a hand on its shoulder, his voice steady. "You're not alone anymore, kid." Before anyone could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared, cutting through the silence like a knife. Lila rushed to the bridge, the crew following close behind. The viewport revealed a sleek, menacing vessel emerging from the nebula, its dark hull gleaming under the faint light. "It's them," Lila said, her voice low but firm. "Whoever attacked Karin's people, they've found us." The crew braced for what was to come, the weight of Karin's story now etched into their hearts. But as the alien child stood beside Marcus, its gaze fixed on the approaching threat, it emitted a soft, determined hum. There was something in its stance, in the faint glow of its skin, that suggested Karin might hold more than just the remnants of a lost species. Perhaps it held the key to fighting back. The celestial venture shook violently as the enemy ship fired warning shots, its sleek angular hull cutting through the nebula's vibrant mists, like a predator closing in on its prey. The bridge was bathed in red as alarms blared, and Lila barked orders to the crew. "Shields up, evasive maneuvers, keep them off us as long as you can." Eric's fingers flew over the controls, his voice tense. "Their weapon systems are locking onto us. We can't outrun them in this rust bucket." Then we fight, Lila said through gritted teeth, her jaw set with determination. Marcus, how are those countermeasures coming? In the engineering? Bay, Marcus worked furiously, Karen hovering near him with wide, curious eyes. Sparks flew as he overrode a faulty capacitor, his hands moving with practiced precision. I can rig a pulse to scramble their targeting systems, but it won't hold for long, he replied through the comms. This ship wasn't built for combat, Captain. Neither were we, Lila shot back. But we're still here, Karen. Tilted its head, observing Marcus's every move. Its tentacles trembled faintly as though sensing the tension in the air. When Marcus paused to catch his breath, Karen reached out, its delicate fingers brushing against the exposed conduit. He was working on. A faint glow emanated from its touch, and the pulse generator began to hum steadily, its output stabilizing. Marcus stared in astonishment. Did you just... He looked at Karen, who emitted a soft melodic sound, its eyes reflecting a quiet resolve. You're full of surprises, kid. Before he could say more, the ship jolted again. Marcus, we need that pulse now. Lila's voice crackled over the intercom. It's ready. Firing it up, Marcus shouted, slamming a lever down. The celestial venture emitted a burst of electromagnetic energy, rippling outward in shimmering waves. On the bridge, Eric watched. The enemy ship's systems flicker and stall momentarily. It's working, he called out. They're disoriented, but not for long. The respite was brief. The enemy vessel recalibrated with frightening speed, and its weapons systems powered back up. A voice echoed through the comms, deep and resonant, laced with an eerie mechanical tone. Surrender the Meliari. Your resistance is meaningless. Leela clenched her fists, her glare fixed on the ship through the viewport. Over my dead body. They're boarding, Eric warned, pointing to the tactical display. Several smaller craft detached from the main vessel, their trajectories heading straight for the celestial venture. In the corridors of the ship, the crew armed themselves with whatever weapons they could muster, mostly improvised tools and repurposed mining equipment. Marcus and Karen joined them near the engine room, where the walls vibrated ominously. Under the strain of the approaching invaders, Karen stood close to Marcus, its tentacles twitching nervously. Stay behind me, kid, Marcus said firmly, gripping a heavy wrench. But Karen's luminous eyes shifted toward the engine core, and it let out a low hum, its gaze distant as though sensing something. The enemy breached the ship, their soldiers pouring into the corridors. They were tall, clad in metallic exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their movements were unnervingly synchronized, and their weapons hummed with lethal energy. Secure the target, one of them commanded in a distorted mechanical voice. The crew fought back with desperation. Sparks flew as tools clashed against alien weapons, and the corridors filled with shouts and the hum of energy blasts. Marcus swung his wrench with brute force, taking down one of the invaders but more closed in around them. Karen stepped forward suddenly, its small frame glowing faintly. Its tentacles extended, and it reached toward the engine core. Karen. No, Marcus shouted, but it was too late. The child's touch sent a surge of energy rippling through the ship. The lights flickered, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. The invaders staggered, their synchronization faltering. Their weapons sputtered, and they moved as though disoriented. Karen stood at the center of it all, its body pulsing with light. The hum grew louder, resonating with a strange harmony that seemed to emanate from deep within the child. On the bridge, Eric's console lit up with warnings. The energy levels. Captain, they're off the charts. Karen's. Doing this, Lila realized, her voice a mix of awe and fear. But for how long? In the engine room, Marcus reached for Karen, his voice urgent. Kid, you've got to stop. You're going to burn yourself out. Karen turned its gaze toward Marcus, its luminous eyes filled with both fear and determination. It let out a soft melodic sound, an unspoken promise, before the energy around it intensified. The invaders recoiled, their exoskeletons sparking as they began to retreat, their voices panicked. As the enemy fell back to their ship, Karen's glow dimmed and it collapsed into Marcus's arms, its body trembling from the strain. Marcus held it tightly, his voice steady but laced with worry. You did good, kid, you did good. The celestial venture fell silent, save for the faint hum of its engines and the distant retreat of the enemy ship. The crew had survived for now, but the battle had only just begun. And as Marcus carried Karen back to the medbay, he couldn't shake the feeling that this child, fragile yet extraordinary, was far more powerful than any of them had realized. The celestial venture drifted in tense silence, its hull scorched from the recent battle. The enemy ship had retreated, but it wouldn't stay gone for long. In the medbay, Karen lay motionless on the examination table, its glow now faint and erratic. Marcus sat beside it, his expression grim as he held one of its delicate tentacles in his calloused hand. "Vitals are unstable," Amara said quietly, scanning Karen with her medical tools. Her brow furrowed as she examined the readings. "Whatever it did, it pushed its body far beyond its limits. It's burning through energy faster than I can stabilize it." Marcus tightened his grip on Karen's tentacle, his jaw set. "We need to help it. There's got to be something we can do." Amara hesitated, then glanced at Lila, who stood at the doorway. The captain's face was unreadable, but her voice was steady. "Marcus, we barely survived that fight. If they come back and this power flares again, it could take us all down." "You think I don't know that?" Marcus shot back, his voice rising. "This kid saved our lives. I'm not giving up on it." Lila's gaze softened just slightly. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know, but we need to think bigger than just us. Whatever Karen did, it's why those bastards want it so badly. If it's that powerful, it's not just our problem, it's the galaxies." Before Marcus could respond, Eric's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got a new problem. The enemy ship, it's not retreating, it's regrouping." Lila cursed under her breath. "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less," Eric replied. "And they've got reinforcements." In the medbay, Karen's faint glow pulsed irregularly, its tentacles twitching as though it could sense the looming threat. Marcus leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Kid, I don't know if you can hear me, but we need you. We can't do this without you." Karen's eyes fluttered open, their crystalline depths dim but focused. It emitted a soft hum, weak but deliberate. Amara's scanner beeped as its energy levels began to climb, though still dangerously low. "They're coming," Lila said, her voice sharp. "If we stay, we're dead. Eric, plot a course for the nearest jump point." "We won't make it," Eric replied, panic creeping into his tone. "They're blocking every exit vector." Karen suddenly sat up, its movements slow but purposeful. It reached toward Marcus, its tentacles brushing against his chest before extending toward the ship's main power conduit. Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure about this, kid?" Karen let out a soft, melodic tone, one filled with resolve. Amara's eyes widened as she read the energy output. "It's trying to channel the ship's power, but at this level, it could destroy itself." "We don't have another option," Lila said, stepping forward. She knelt beside Karen, her voice steady but soft. "You don't have to do this, we'll fight for you." Karen met her gaze, its eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. Another melodic hum filled the room, and Lila nodded, as though understanding its unspoken answer. "All right," she said, standing. "Do what you need to do." The ship shuddered. As Karen connected to the power conduit, lights dimmed across the celestial venture, and a low hum resonated through the hull, growing in intensity. On the bridge, Eric stared at the tactical display in shock. "Energy levels are spiking. The ship, it's reacting to Karen. I think it's amplifying the core." Outside, the nebula lit up as the enemy ships closed in, their weapons charged, glowing ominously. But before they could fire, the celestial venture released a massive wave of energy. It rippled outward in concentric rings, blinding and impossibly bright. The enemy ships faltered, their systems overloaded by the surge. One by one, they erupted into flames, their hulls disintegrating under the force of the wave. The remaining ships scattered, fleeing into the nebula's depths. Inside the celestial venture, Karen slumped forward, its glow fading completely. Marcus caught it before it fell, cradling its small frame. "Karen," he called, his voice breaking. Stay with me, kid. Amara rushed forward, her scanner whirring frantically. It's alive, she said after a tense moment. Barely, but it's alive. The crew gathered on the bridge as Lila surveyed the wreckage through the viewport. They're gone, she said quietly. For now. Marcus carried Karin back to the med bay, his steps heavy but determined. You saved us again, kid, he murmured. But this can't keep happening. We'll find a way to protect you for good this time. Days later, the crew arrived at a neutral station deep in uncharted space. Karin, still recovering, watched as Lila transmitted a message to the Intergalactic Council. They need to know what we found, she said, her voice resolute, and what it means. As the message was sent, Karin reached out, placing a small tentacle on Marcus's hand. Its glow returned faintly, a quiet promise of hope. For now they had survived, and with Karin by their side, they were ready for whatever came next.